Hello, and welcome to WhatIFHistory, the channel where we don't just learn about the past, we step inside it. Tonight, we travel to a place frozen in time and shrouded in fear. A place where the line between a tragic accident and an unspeakable horror is so blurred, it has baffled investigators for over 60 years. We are going to the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia, to a desolate, wind-swept slope known by the indigenous Mansi people as Dyatlov, the Dead Mountain. This is a story born from the heart of the Cold War, an era defined by secrets, paranoia, and the unwavering belief that humanity, through sheer force of will and science, could conquer any frontier. But on this mountain, that belief was shattered. In February of 1959, 9 of the Soviet Union's most experienced and capable young hikers died there. But they didn't just freeze to death. They died in a state of absolute inexplicable terror. They cut their way out of their own tent from the inside, fled into a blizzard in the middle of the night without shoes or coats, and were found with injuries so bizarre, so violent, that the official investigation could only conclude they were killed by a compelling natural force. A conclusion so vague it only served to deepen the mystery. Forget what you think you know about survival stories. This isn't a tale of man versus nature. This is a story of man versus the unknown. So take a deep breath of that cold, sterile air. Because you're not just going to hear about what happened at the Dyatlov Pass. You are going to be there. Our story begins not in the darkness, but in the light. It begins with the vibrant, ambitious energy of post-war Soviet youth. Imagine a world brimming with confidence, a belief in science, progress, and the indomitable spirit of mankind. This was the world of Igor Dyatlov and his friends. They were the children of a generation that had defeated Nazism and was now reaching for the stars, launching Sputnik into orbit just 2 years prior. They embodied the optimism of the Khrushchev thaw, a brief period of liberalization and hope. They weren't reckless amateurs. They were the best of the best from the Ural Polytechnical Institute's sports club. Masters of Sport, the highest designation for an athlete in the Soviet Union. They had conquered treacherous peaks before. This expedition, a Category 3 trek, the most difficult classification, was meant to be their crowning achievement. A brutal 16-day journey through the unforgiving northern Urals, culminating in the ascent of Mount Otorten. For them, this was not a vacation. It was a testament to their physical and mental fortitude, a pilgrimage to the heart of their nation's raw, untamed wilderness. Let's meet them. Because these aren't just names in a cold case file. They were real people, full of life and dreams, their personalities captured forever in the frozen frames of their recovered cameras. There's Igor Dyatlov, the 23-year-old leader, a brilliant radio engineering student, known for his meticulous planning and quiet confidence. He designed and built a small, innovative stove for the trip, a testament to his ingenuity. Look at the photos they took. You can see the respect the others had for him. He was the anchor, the calm center around which the group orbited. Yuri Georgy Krivonishenko, also 23. An energetic, fun-loving construction foreman who loved to play the mandolin. In the group's recovered photos, he's often the one making a funny face, a spark of light in the monochrome landscape. His presence was the group's soundtrack, a defiant bit of warmth against the oppressive cold. Rustem Slobodin, 23, a graduate engineer. Strong, athletic, and reliable. The dependable core of the group, known for his endurance and steady nerve. He was the one you wanted beside you when things got tough. Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22. The heart of the expedition, experienced, tough, and caring. Her diary entries, recovered later, are filled with a mix of romantic longing and the fierce determination of a seasoned trekker. She had briefly dated Dyatlov, and a quiet, unresolved tension lingered between them. Her writings give us the most intimate glimpse into the group's emotional landscape. Lyudmila Luda Dubinina, just 20 years old. The youngest female member, but fierce and resilient. She was known for her courage and for singing songs to keep spirits high, even when the temperatures plummeted. She had survived a gunshot accident on a previous trip, a testament to her toughness. Her diary entries speak of the immense beauty of the mountains, a stark contrast to her eventual fate. Alexander Sasha Kolevatov, 24, a student of nuclear physics, described as reserved and methodical. He worked in a secret institute in Moscow, a postbox, which would later fuel countless conspiracy theories. Was he just a student, or was he something more? His background in a classified field makes him a central figure in the more paranoid theories. He was the group's supply manager, organized and precise. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, 23, the son of a French communist who had been executed during Stalin's purges. Despite his tragic family history, Nikolai was known for his warmth and excellent sense of humor. He was the group's jester, born in a concentration camp but filled with an infectious love for life. He was a living symbol of resilience. And then there was the outlier, Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov. At 37, he was much older than the students, a mysterious figure, a decorated World War II veteran with several tattoos, including the word Gina and the five-pointed star. He introduced himself as Sasha, and no one quite knew why he, a last-minute addition, was on this trip. He was a professional tour guide and instructor, but his presence felt different, an enigma. His service records are patchy, his motives unclear. Was he a KGB plant sent to monitor the group, or just a man seeking adventure? His camera was one of those recovered, yet he appears in very few photos, as if he preferred to be the observer. Finally, there was Yuri Yudin, the 10th member. On the 4th day of the expedition, a crippling flare-up of his chronic sciatica forced him to turn back. He said a painful goodbye to his friends, watching them ski off into the white wilderness. He was heartbroken. He had no idea he was the luckiest man alive. He would be the one to identify their bodies, a task that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He dedicated decades to his own private investigation, forever searching for an answer that would grant him peace. The early days of the trek were filled with the kind of rugged joy only true mountaineers understand. Their diaries and photographs paint a vivid picture. Long days of skiing through dense forests, the crunch of snow under their skis, the camaraderie of setting up camp at night. They sang songs, told jokes, and even published a satirical camp newspaper they called The Evening Otorten. Issue number 1, dated February the 1st, 1959, was filled with in-jokes. It reported on scientific debates about whether Yetis lived in the region and poked fun at the love between certain members of the group. It was the cheerful, mundane record of a group of friends completely at ease in their element, utterly unaware of the abyss they were skiing towards. On January 31st, they reached the edge of the highland area. They were out of the forests now, entering the vast, exposed emptiness of the mountain slopes. They cached some food and equipment for the return journey, a standard practice. They were preparing for the final, most difficult leg of their journey, the ascent to Mount Otorten, February the 1st. This is the day everything changes. The weather, which had been manageable, turns against them. A brutal wind picks up, whipping snow across the landscape, reducing visibility to almost zero. They are pushing towards a pass, but they drift west, ending up on the slope of a different mountain altogether. Kholat Shachel, the Dead Mountain. The name itself is a source of endless speculation. In the Mansi language, it means dead mountain, because of a lack of game and vegetation on its slopes. But local legends also tell of 9 Mansi hunters who perished there long ago, a story that would later be seen as a chilling omen. Dyatlov makes a decision. It's getting late, the storm is worsening. Instead of retreating to the relative safety of the tree line below, he orders them to make camp right there, on the exposed, open slope of the mountain. Why? This is the first mystery. It was a baffling choice for a leader as experienced as Dyatlov. It violated a fundamental rule of mountaineering. Was he trying to practice camping in harsh conditions? Was he simply too exhausted to retreat? Or did he not want to lose the altitude they had fought so hard to gain? We will never know. 59. You are on the side of a desolate mountain in the middle of nowhere. The wind is a physical force, a constant, shrieking monster that tears at the fabric of your tent and sucks the warmth from your bones. Inside the tent, it's cramped. 9 of you, huddled together. But it's a fortress against the storm. Dyatlov's small stove is likely glowing, providing a pocket of warmth. You can hear the faint strumming of Krivonishenko's mandolin over the howl of the wind. You're writing in your diary, or maybe reading a book. The mood is calm. You are with your friends. You are professionals. The last photo recovered from their cameras was taken at this time. It shows some of the group setting up the tent. The image is blurry, indistinct. It looks like it was taken in a hurry, perhaps as the light was failing. It's the last image of them alive. Something so terrifying, so immediate, that it overrides every instinct for survival, every ounce of their extensive training. Imagine the scene. You're bundled in your sleeping bag, drifting off to sleep. The wind is a constant roar, a sound you've gotten used to. Maybe it's a vibration, a pressure, a sudden gut-wrenching feeling of pure primal fear. It's not an animal. There are no tracks. It's not another group of people. There is no evidence of a struggle. It's something that makes you and your 8 companions, without a moment's hesitation, take out your knives. Not to fight an intruder outside, but to slash and tear your way out of your only shelter. From the inside, you spill out into the hurricane-force winds and the biting, sub-zero darkness. And you run. You run without your heavy coats, your gloves, your hats, your food, everything. You and your 8 friends, a small terrified cluster of humanity, flee down the steep, snowy slope into the blackness, away from the tent, away from something. What could it have been? What could possibly drive 9 experienced mountaineers to commit such a suicidal act of self-preservation? This is the core of the Dyatlov Pass mystery. And to understand it, we have to follow your footsteps in the snow. The search party wouldn't find the abandoned camp for another 3.5 weeks. When the searchers finally arrive on February 26th, the scene is eerie and confusing. The tent is partially collapsed under the weight of the snow, but it's not buried. It's clearly visible. One of Dyatlov's ski poles is stuck in the snow nearby, marking the campsite. Slices of bacon are laid out, ready to be eaten. The diaries, the money, the maps, the mandolin, all there. It's as if the occupants simply vanished into thin air. The investigators find 8 or 9 sets of tracks leading away from the tent, downhill, towards the distant tree line about a mile away. The tracks are made by people wearing socks, a single boot, or nothing at all. They are measured, walking side by side, as if the group retreated in an organized, albeit shoeless fashion. This only deepens the mystery. If they were so terrified that they had to cut their way out of the tent, why did they then walk calmly away? And if they weren't in a panic, why did they leave their boots and coats behind in lethal temperatures? The contradictions are maddening. They lead them down the slope, becoming fainter as they are covered by drifting snow, until they disappear at the edge of a dense forest. And there, under a giant, ancient cedar tree, they find the first 2 bodies. They are lying next to the remains of a small, hastily built fire. They are stripped down to their underwear. Their hands are raw and abraded, and the branches on the cedar tree above them are broken up to a height of 15 feet, suggesting one of them had desperately tried to climb it. To get a better view of the tent? The branches were green. They wouldn't have burned well. The scene is one of profound desperation. The medical examiner would later conclude they died of hypothermia. A simple, tragic end. But it doesn't explain anything. In the final stages of severe hypothermia, as the brain begins to shut down, victims can feel a sudden, overwhelming sensation of being hot. They start tearing off their clothes, unaware that they are hastening their own death. This could explain their state of undress, but it doesn't explain what drove them from the tent in the first place. The next 3 bodies are found scattered at intervals between the cedar tree and the camp. It's Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Their positions suggest they were trying to make it back to the tent. Dyatlov is found lying on his back, his face turned towards the camp. One hand is clutching a small birch branch. Zina Kolmogorova is found further up the slope, closer to the tent than anyone else. She was a fighter. She had crawled, fought for every inch, trying to get back to the shelter that they had so inexplicably fled. Rustam Slobodin is found with a small fracture in his skull, about 6 inches long. The official cause of death for all three is hypothermia. So far, the story is a group of hikers, perhaps disoriented by a small avalanche or a sudden, terrifying noise, flee their tent. The skull fracture is an accident. The paradoxical undressing is a known medical phenomenon. It's a neat, tidy package. But then, 2 months later, in May, as the snow begins to melt, the search party finds the remaining 4. And they are found deep in the woods, in a ravine, buried under 13 feet of snow, not far from the cedar tree. They are Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Alexander Kolevatov, and Lyudmila Dubinina. And their injuries are horrific. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol has a massive, crushing skull fracture. And Lyudmila Dubinina, the young, vibrant singer of the group, has injuries that are even more severe. He states that the force required to cause such damage would be equivalent to being hit by a car at high speed. It was extreme, crushing pressure. He is adamant that it could not have been caused by another human being because there were no external signs of trauma, no bruises, no soft tissue damage corresponding to the internal injuries. It was as if they had been hugged to death by an impossibly strong force. And then there is the final, gruesome detail. The detail that has haunted this story for decades. Lyudmila Dubinina is missing her tongue, and part of her lips and facial tissue. Alexander Kolevatov is also missing his eyebrows. Semyon Zolotaryov is missing his eyeballs. Small animals, like shrews or mice, could have been responsible for the soft tissue damage, as the bodies lay in the melting snow for weeks. This is a plausible, natural explanation. But in the context of everything else, it feels deeply unsettling, especially the tongue. Medical experts have argued that for the tongue to be removed so cleanly, it would have had to be extracted from the root, an unlikely feat for a small scavenger. The 4 bodies in the ravine also add another layer of mystery. They were better dressed than the others. It appears they had taken clothes from their dead companions by the cedar tree. Dubinina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Krivonishenko's woolen trousers. Zolotaryov was found wearing Dubinina's coat and hat. It's a grim portrait of survival. The last one's alive, trying to fight off the cold, using the clothes of the fallen. And then there's the radiation. When the bodies and their clothing are tested, several items show levels of radioactivity significantly above normal. Not lethal levels, but high enough to be considered unusual. Where did it come from? Kolevatov, the nuclear physics student, worked in a secret facility. Was his clothing contaminated before the trip? Or were the hikers exposed to something out there on the mountain? The Soviet authorities, faced with a case that defied all logical explanation, did what authorities often do. They shut it down. The investigation was closed in May 1959, just 3 months after it began. The official conclusion was a masterpiece of bureaucratic ambiguity. The hikers died as a result of an overwhelming, unknown, compelling force. The files were classified, and the area around Kolatsiakal was closed to the public for 3 years. And so, the speculation began. A vacuum of facts was filled with a universe of theories, each one trying to connect the dots of this impossible puzzle. What was this compelling force? What happened on Dead Mountain? To find the answer, we have to go back to that tent, back to that moment of terror, and explore the possibilities one by one. Let's start with the most accepted, the most scientific theory, the one that modern investigators and scientists have come back to time and time again: an avalanche. Now, you might be thinking, but the investigators in 1959 ruled that out. And you'd be right. The scene didn't look like a typical avalanche site. The tent wasn't flattened, ski poles were still standing, and the hiker's track seemed too orderly. But what if it wasn't a typical avalanche? Imagine you are back in the tent. It's dark. The wind is howling. The tent is pitched on a slope of about 23 degrees. Above you, a slab of snow has been accumulating, packed down by the relentless wind. You are asleep, unaware of the tension building in the snowpack above. Then it happens. Not a massive roaring wall of snow, but a sudden cracking sound. The slab gives way. A heavy, dense plate of snow, maybe 16 feet wide, slides down and slams into the upper part of the tent. It doesn't bury you completely, but it pins you. The weight is immense, crushing. Panic erupts. You are trapped in the dark, under a crushing weight of snow. You can't get to the entrance. The only way out is to cut. You slash at the fabric, desperate for air, for escape. You pull your friends out, one by one. Someone, maybe Nikolai, has sustained a serious head injury in the initial impact. Others may have been bruised, but in the adrenaline-fueled chaos, you don't feel it yet. You are outside. It's pitch black. A blizzard is raging. Your tent, your only shelter, is partially collapsed and filled with snow. You can't go back in. Your training tells you that a second, larger avalanche could be imminent. You have to get to safety. The tree line, a mile down the slope, is the only rational choice. You make the decision to retreat as a group. You help the injured. You move together, orderly, trying to conserve energy. You leave your boots and clothes behind, because digging for them in the dark, in a damaged tent, with the threat of another avalanche looming, is a risk you can't take. Your priority is to get to the trees, build a snow cave, and wait out the storm. You reach the giant cedar. You frantically try to build a fire, but the wood is wet and the wind is relentless. The cold is beginning to set in, a deep, lethal chill that seeps into your bones. Hypothermia is clouding your judgment. Two of your friends, Krivonishenko and Doroshenko, succumb to the cold. They begin the paradoxical undressing. The rest of you realize the fire is not enough. You have to do something more. Dyatlov, Zina, and Rustem make the heroic, desperate decision to try and return to the tent to retrieve supplies. They are the strongest. They fight their way back up the slope, but the brutal cold and the wind are too much. They collapse, one by one, frozen monuments to their own courage. Meanwhile, the remaining four, Zolotaryov, Nikolai, Kolevatov, and Luda, have a different plan. They will dig a snow den in the ravine, a last-ditch effort to create a shelter. As they are working, or perhaps after they have finished, the second disaster strikes. The snow on the edge of the ravine, weakened by their digging, collapses. A localized avalanche of heavy, wet snow buries them. The immense pressure of the snow, tons of it, crushes them against the rocks and ice at the bottom of the ravine. Lying there, in the dark, under the snow, they die. The water from the melting snow and the small scavengers of the forest then cause the soft tissue damage to their faces. This theory, the slab avalanche theory, is compelling. A 2021 study by scientists in Switzerland even used advanced animation models, the same ones used in the movie Frozen, to show that a small delayed slab avalanche was indeed possible under the exact conditions present that night. It seems to explain almost everything. The cut tent, the retreat, the two separate groups of bodies, the horrific internal injuries. It's a logical, scientific, and deeply tragic explanation. It turns the story from a paranormal horror into a harrowing tale of survival against a series of catastrophic, unlucky events. But is it too neat? For 60 years, experienced mountaineers have looked at the evidence and shaken their heads. They argue that the slope was not steep enough for a dangerous avalanche. They point to the fact that Dyatlov was an expert and would have known not to camp there if the risk was high. They question why the tracks were so orderly if they were fleeing for their lives. And what about the radiation? The avalanche theory has no explanation for it. And what about the missing tongue? While scavengers are possible, the explanation has never fully satisfied the doubters. The avalanche theory paints a picture of a tragic accident. But for many, the sheer weirdness of the scene, the constellation of bizarre facts, points to something else. Something stranger. So let's leave the cold comfort of science behind for a moment and explore a different path. Let's consider a force of nature that is invisible, silent, and capable of driving a person mad. Let's talk about infrasound. Imagine you are in the tent again. The wind is not just a sound. It's a complex interaction of air currents moving over the topography of the mountain. Under very specific conditions, a phenomenon known as a Kármán vortex street can occur. This is when wind flows around a blunt object, like the dome of Dyatlov, creating a series of oscillating vortices. These vortices can produce powerful, low-frequency sound waves, infrasound, well below the range of human hearing. You can't hear it, but you can feel it. It's a deep, resonant vibration that penetrates the tent, your sleeping bag, your very skull. It resonates with the fluid in your inner ear and the organs in your chest. The physical effects are immediate and terrifying. Intense nausea, shortness of breath, a feeling of dread so profound it borders on a psychotic episode. Your heart rate skyrockets. You are overcome with a wave of irrational, unexplainable panic. Your brain is screaming at you, get out, now. There is no logical reason for it, but the feeling is so overwhelming that it bypasses all your training, all your rational thought. It's a purely physical reaction to a sound you cannot hear. The entire group experiences it at the same time. A collective, temporary madness. You slash your way out of the tent, not because of an external threat, but because the inside of the tent has become an unbearable torture chamber of vibration and fear. You run. You stumble down the slope, desperate to escape the invisible pressure. As you get further away from the mountain's peak, the source of the infrasound, the effect begins to lessen. The panic subsides, but it's replaced by a new, more tangible horror. You are a mile from your shelter, in a blizzard, without proper clothing. The rest of the story plays out much like the avalanche theory. You try to build a fire. You succumb to hypothermia. Some try to return to the tent. The last 4 fall into the ravine, and the weight of the snow crushes them. The infrasound didn't kill them directly, but it signed their death warrant. It made them commit the fatal error of abandoning their shelter. This theory is seductive. It explains the most puzzling aspect of the case, the sudden, irrational flight. It provides a compelling natural force that is both unseen and powerful. However, there is no direct evidence for it. It's a hypothesis. While scientifically plausible, we can never know if the specific weather conditions that night were right to create such a phenomenon. It explains the panic, but it doesn't explain the crushing chest injuries any better than the avalanche theory. It also fails to account for the radiation. The puzzle remains incomplete. The pieces don't quite fit. We have explored the fury of the earth and the madness of the air. But what if the threat came not from nature, but from man? The Soviet Union in 1959 was a place of secrets, a place of hidden military bases, advanced weapons research, and a government that would not hesitate to cover up a terrible mistake. Let's go back to the mountain one last time. But this time, you are not alone. You are in your tent, on the slope of a mountain you were never supposed to be on. You drifted off course. You are in a place you shouldn't be. And you are about to see something you shouldn't see. Suddenly, the night sky ignites. A blinding, silent flash of orange or white light illuminates the entire landscape, casting stark, dancing shadows. It's followed by a sound, a deafening, bone-jarring concussion that feels like the sky is being ripped apart. The shockwave hits your tent like a physical blow. You are terrified and disoriented. You have no idea what you've just witnessed. A meteor. Your ears are ringing. You look up at the sky. Maybe you see strange lights, falling fireballs, or the trail of a rocket. This is the military test theory. It suggests that the hikers accidentally wandered into the testing area for a secret Soviet weapon. The area was indeed not far from Baikonur Cosmodrome, the heart of the Soviet space and missile program. Eyewitnesses in the region, another hiking group about 30 miles south, reported seeing strange, bright orange spheres in the sky to the north on the night of the incident. What kind of weapon? The theories vary. Some suggest a concussion bomb, a fuel air explosive that creates a massive pressure wave without much fragmentation. Such a blast could cause severe internal injuries, like the crushed ribs and skulls, with minimal external damage. It would also explain the sudden, violent impulse to flee the tent. Another possibility is a radiological weapon, a dirty bomb, or the fallout from a rocket test. This would neatly explain the radioactivity found on the victims' clothes. Perhaps the hikers were exposed to a cloud of toxic fuel or radioactive particles. This might have caused them to become temporarily blinded or incapacitated, leading them to stumble away from their camp. In this scenario, the Soviet military, realizing there were witnesses to their secret, illegal test, would have moved in to clean up the mess. The official story is that the bodies were found by civilian search parties. But what if a military unit found them first? This is where the theory takes a darker turn. Perhaps some of the hikers were still alive. The military, under strict orders to leave no witnesses, might have finished the job. A quick, brutal interrogation could explain the missing tongue. The bodies could have been moved and arranged to look like a mountaineering accident. The entire investigation would have been a sham, a carefully orchestrated cover-up from start to finish, with the KGB pulling the strings. This theory is compelling because it seems to explain the elements that the natural causes theories cannot: the extreme injuries, the radiation, the missing tongue, and the subsequent government secrecy. The presence of Kolovatov, the nuclear physicist, and Zolotaryov, the mysterious older veteran, adds fuel to the fire. Were they somehow involved? Were they KGB informants planted in the group? However, like the other theories, the military cover-up has significant problems. There is no documented evidence of any missile launches or weapons tests in that specific area on that night. The pattern of the hikers' flight, a calm, orderly walk downhill, doesn't align with fleeing a massive explosion. And if the military wanted to cover up their involvement, staging such a bizarre, inexplicable scene seems like a very poor way to do it. A simple, faked avalanche would have been far more convincing. The radiation levels, while elevated, were not high enough to be lethal, or even to cause radiation sickness. They could have come from natural sources, or from Kolovatov's work clothes, or even from the use of thorium gas mantles in lanterns, which were common at the time. So, we are left with three compelling, yet deeply flawed, narratives. An avalanche that doesn't look like an avalanche, an invisible sound that leaves no trace, and a secret military conspiracy with no concrete proof. Each theory explains some of the pieces of the puzzle, but none of them explains all of them. The truth remains stubbornly out of reach, buried under 60 years of snow and speculation. It's possible that the answer is a combination of these events. A perfect storm of terror. Imagine a slab avalanche strikes the tent, causing initial panic and some injuries. As the hikers flee into the night, they see the strange orange lights of a missile test in the sky, adding to their confusion and fear. Disoriented and terrified, they get lost. The brutal cold, the relentless wind, and the creeping madness of hypothermia do the rest. The last four, seeking shelter in the ravine, are buried by a second, natural snow collapse. This perfect storm scenario is perhaps the most likely. It braids together the threads of science, eyewitness accounts, and the known facts of the case. It allows for multiple forces, both natural and perhaps man-made, to contribute to the final tragedy. But for some, even this complex web of unfortunate coincidences isn't enough. The sheer high strangeness of the case pushes them to look beyond the realms of science and military secrecy. It pushes them into the world of the paranormal, the Forteana, the things that lurk in the dark corners of our maps and our minds. To truly understand the scope of this mystery, we must be willing to walk these paths as well. We must be willing to ask the questions that science dismisses. Let's start with the one that the hikers themselves joked about in their final, cheerful camp newspaper. What if the local legends are true? What if they were not alone in the mountains? Let's talk about the Siberian snowman, the Menk. The indigenous Mansi people have lived in the Urals for centuries. Their folklore is rich with tales of spirits, gods, and creatures that inhabit the wilderness. One of these creatures is the Menk, a large, hairy, ape-like hominid, often compared to the Yeti of the Himalayas or the Sasquatch of North America. They are described as powerful, territorial, and extremely dangerous. Kolatshiakal and the mountain they were trying to reach, Otorten, whose name translates to "do not go there," lie in the heart of what the Mansi consider to be the Menka's territory. Now, put yourself back in the tent. The scientific, rational part of your brain dismisses these stories as folklore. But you are in the heart of the wilderness. The wind plays tricks on your ears, making strange, moaning sounds. Every shadow outside the thin canvas of your tent seems to move. Then you hear it. A sound that is not the wind. A deep, guttural sound. A roar, or a series of clicks, or something utterly alien to your experience. It's close. Too close. Or maybe you see it. One of you looks out of the tent and sees a figure standing in the swirling snow. A silhouette. Tall, broad, and distinctly not human. It's watching you. The panic that ensues is not from an avalanche or an invisible sound wave. It's the primal, instinctive terror of a prey animal that has just come face to face with a predator it cannot comprehend. You don't think. You react. You cut your way out and you run. You run from the monster. You flee down the slope. The creature, perhaps not wanting to kill, but simply to drive you from its territory, follows at a distance. Its presence is a constant, terrifying pressure at your backs. You reach the cedar tree. You desperately try to climb it, to escape the thing on the ground. Krivonishenko and Doroshenko are left by the fire as bait, or perhaps they are the first to freeze. The others, realizing the cold will kill them if the creature doesn't, make their desperate attempts to get back to the tent, or to dig a shelter. But the Menk finds the last four in the ravine, and this is where the theory provides a gruesome explanation for the injuries. The crushing force that shattered the ribs of Zolotaryov and Dubinina, the force the medical examiner compared to a car crash. A large, powerful primate would be more than capable of inflicting such injuries. A bear hug from a creature of immense strength could easily snap ribs like twigs, leaving minimal external bruising. The skull fracture of Thibaut Brignol could be the result of a single, powerful blow, or having his head slammed against a rock. This theory explains the initial panic and the devastating internal injuries in one terrifying package. It even offers a potential explanation for the missing tongue. Perhaps it was a deliberate, ritualistic mutilation by a creature we do not understand. The evidence? It's circumstantial, but tantalizing. The hikers themselves joked about Yetis. A piece of paper found at the camp reportedly had a cryptic note scrawled on it. From now on, we know that the snowmen exist. Though the authenticity of this note is highly debated. There were also reports from the initial search party of unusually large, unidentifiable footprints in the area, though these were never photographed or officially documented. The Menk theory is a horror movie brought to life. It taps into our deepest fears of the unknown wilderness and the things that might be hiding in it. But it rests on a huge assumption that such a creature actually exists. With no body, no DNA, no clear photographs, the Siberian snowman remains for now a creature of folklore. A fascinating but unproven explanation for a very real tragedy. But what if the threat came not from the earth, but from the sky? What if those strange orange spheres seen by the other hikers weren't missiles at all? This brings us to our next theory, the one that has become a cornerstone of the Dyatlov Pass mythology, the UFO encounter. Let's return to the tent for the final time. You are settling in for the night. Suddenly, a light appears outside. Not a flashlight, not a fire. A brilliant, silent, and utterly unnatural light. It hovers over the slope, bathing the entire landscape in an eerie, cold glow. It might be orange, it might be blue, it might be a piercing white. The light is accompanied by a low hum, a vibration that you feel in your teeth. It's the same physical pressure described in the infrasound theory, but this time, it has a visible source. You are witnessing something impossible. An unidentified flying object. Your reaction is a mixture of awe and absolute terror. This is not a military test. This is something else, something alien. The presence is overwhelming, and your minds, unprepared for such a reality-shattering event, break. You cut your way out of the tent, not to run from it, but perhaps to get a better look, or to flee in a state of profound psychological shock. You stumble down the hill, your eyes fixed on the lights in the sky. The craft, or crafts, follow you. They hover silently, observing. The radiation found on your clothes. It's not from a nuclear weapon, but from the propulsion system of the alien vehicle. A strange, otherworldly energy that has contaminated your clothing. You reach the woods. The lights are still there, darting between the trees, casting long, unnatural shadows. What happens next is a matter of speculation. Perhaps the aliens are merely observers. They watch as you, disoriented and terrified, succumb to the elements. Your flight from the UFO leads directly to your death by hypothermia. Or perhaps the encounter becomes more direct. The four in the ravine, Zolotaryov, Dubinina, Thibaut Brignol, and Kolevatov, are somehow subjected to a force from the craft. A beam of energy, a focused gravitational wave, something that can exert immense pressure without physical contact. This would explain the car crash injuries with no external wounds. It's the perfect explanation for the medical examiner's bizarre findings. And the mutilations, the missing tongue and eyes. In the lore of ufology, these are classic, chilling details of alleged alien encounters and cattle mutilations. They are often described as precise, surgical removals of tissue for purposes unknown. Perhaps the hikers were not just killed, but studied. Samples were taken. This theory, as fantastical as it sounds, does an incredible job of tying together the strangest pieces of evidence. It explains the initial flight, the eyewitness accounts of orange spheres, the radiation, the bizarre internal injuries, and the gruesome mutilations. It fits the evidence almost perfectly, provided you are willing to take one giant leap of faith into the realm of extraterrestrial visitors. The UFO theory transforms the Dyatlov Pass incident from a terrestrial mystery into a cosmic horror story. It suggests that the overwhelming, unknown, compelling force from the official report was not of this world. But we are not done yet. There is one more path to walk, a path that combines the secrecy of the military theory with the high strangeness of the paranormal. What if the threat was man-made, but the weapon was not a bomb or a missile? What if the Soviet Union was experimenting with something far more terrifying? The Cold War was not just a race for nuclear supremacy. It was also a secret war for control of the human mind. Both the US and the USSR poured vast secret resources into parapsychological research, telekinesis, remote viewing, psychic warfare. They were desperately trying to weaponize the supernatural. Now imagine you are the hikers, camped on a remote mountain slope. But you are not there by accident. This is not a simple hiking trip. This is a clandestine field test. And you are the guinea pigs. Perhaps Zolotaryov, the mysterious older veteran, was not just a guide. Perhaps he was a KGB handler. Perhaps Kolevatov, the nuclear physicist, was not just a student, but a scientist involved in a fringe project. The rest of the group, unwitting participants in a horrific experiment. What were they testing? A psychotronic weapon, a device designed to project fear, panic, or hallucinations directly into the human brain. Or perhaps they weren't testing a device at all. Perhaps they were testing a person, a psychic operative, a powerful telepath hidden somewhere nearby, focusing their mental energy on the 9 subjects in the tent. The result is the same. A sudden, inexplicable wave of terror, a collective hallucination. You see things that aren't there. A monster, an alien, a fire. Your own deepest fears are projected into your mind. You slash your way out of the tent, fleeing not a real threat, but the phantoms in your own heads. The experiment goes horribly wrong. The psychic blast is too powerful. It doesn't just scare you, it drives you mad, and eventually kills you. The crushing injuries. Perhaps they are the result of telekinesis, a psychic force strong enough to snap bones. Or perhaps, in your state of weaponized madness, you inflict the injuries on each other, or on yourselves, without leaving any external marks. When the military or the KGB arrive to assess the results, they find a scene of carnage. 9 dead bodies. The experiment is a catastrophic failure. The only thing left to do is cover it up. They stage the scene to look like a mountaineering accident, but the details are too strange, too contradictory. They can't hide the sheer weirdness of what their psychic weapon has done. They close the case, classify the files, and bury their terrible secret under decades of silence. This theory is perhaps the most paranoid, but it weaves together the threads of government secrecy, Cold War paranoia and paranormal phenomena. It suggests that the compelling force was not natural, not extraterrestrial, but something born from the darkest ambitions of the human mind. So, we have an avalanche, infrasound, a military weapon, a menk, a UFO, and a psychic experiment. A buffet of horrors, each one plausible in its own way, yet none of them provable. This is the enduring power of the Dyatlov Pass incident. It's a story that refuses to be solved. It's a historical black box. We have the inputs, 9 healthy, experienced hikers. And we have the outputs, 9 dead bodies in a state of bizarre, violent disarray. But the process, the equation that connects the beginning to the end, is missing. And that brings us to the final piece of evidence. An image that defies every explanation we've explored. It's a photograph. The very last photograph, taken on the last roll of film found in one of the hiker's cameras. It has been dubbed Frame 34. It was taken in the dark. It's a blurry, chaotic mess. It appears to show the bright, glowing shape of a light source, possibly a flashlight or a fire, against a dark background. But the object is strange and the context is unknown. Was it taken by a hiker in their final moments, trying to capture an image of their attacker? Or is it simply an accidental shot, a meaningless smudge of light and shadow, the last gasp of a dying camera? Like everything else in this story, Frame 34 is a Rorschach test. Some see a UFO, some see the headlight of a snowmobile, some see the face of a Yeti, and some see nothing at all. And so, we are left to wonder. We are left on that frozen slope, staring at the empty tent, following the ghostly footprints in the snow. We are left with the silence of the mountains and the endless, nagging questions. What did they see? What did they hear? What were they running from? Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Perhaps they are meant to serve as a reminder. A reminder that even in our modern world of science and certainty, there are still places where the map ends. There are still forces we do not understand. And there are still nights where the universe can present a horror so strange, so compelling, that it defies all explanation. The story of the Dyatlov Pass is not just a story about 9 people who died. It's a story about the limits of our understanding. It's a chilling whisper from the past, a question mark frozen in time, asking us a simple, terrifying question. What are you afraid of in the dark? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. Here at What If History, we believe that the past is never truly dead. It's just waiting for the right questions to be asked. Join us next time as we travel to the year 1518 to the city of Strasbourg, where hundreds of people were gripped by an inexplicable mania, a plague of dancing that forced them to dance until they collapsed or even died. What was the truth behind the dancing plague? Was it a disease, a curse, or a case of mass hysteria that pushed the human body to its absolute limits? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the strangest corners of history. Until then, stay curious.